This is The Civil Fleet, the podcast focused on the activist-led refugee rescue and support missions across Fortress Europe, with me, Ben Coles. In this episode, we speak with Kiana, Anne, Mahtab and Hannah from the Free Homayoun campaign. Homayoun Sabetara is a widower and father of two who fled Iran to reunite with his daughters in Germany in 2021. Mahtab, one of the people we're speaking today, is one of his daughters. Along the way, Homayoun was forced to drive a car carrying several other people across the Greece-Turkey border. When he got to Greece, he was arrested, charged with human smuggling because he was behind the wheel, and sentenced to 18 years behind bars at a trial conducted without interpreters. Kiana, Anna, Mahtab and Hannah are going to tell us more about Homayoun's case, his upcoming appeal, which is on April 22nd, and about European government's systematic criminalisation of people on the move. So before we get into today's episode, I'd just like to remind you that The Civil Fleet is not just a podcast, it's also a blog at civilfleet.com. Over there we've got some exclusive investigative stories, we've got some interviews that are written up, and we have news stories and all kinds of things. So go to civilfleet.com for more of those. Also, if you like what the Civil Fleet is doing and you would like to help support us to continue to platform the amazing people that we have had on here, then you can go to ko-fi.com/civilfleet. That's ko-fi.com/civilfleet, and you can make a micro donation there. You can donate a cup of a coffee, or you could donate the cost of a Ferrari if you like. Our costs are really small to keep the Civil Fleet going. I don't have any support other than my own bank account and someone who donates £3 every month to the Civil Fleet. That's amazing. And if you would like to help to do that, then go to ko-fi.com/civilfleet. Right, that's enough from me. Let's get on with the show. So, shall we start the podcast? Shall we do this thing?
Yes.
Okay, so Kiana and Mahtab and Hannah, thank you very, very much for coming on the Civil Fleet podcast.
Thank you for inviting us.
So what's a good thing to do on the podcast so people can put picture of the voice with a name? Why don't we start off by, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in this Free Homayoun campaign? Am I saying his name correctly? Is it Homayoun? Perfect. So this is what the episode's going to be about today. We're going to talk about the campaign to free Homayoun. We're going to talk about his background story and the systematic conditions that are arresting people, trying to cross borders in Greece and all over Europe, I guess. So before we get started in talking about that kind of stuff, before we talk about Homayoun's case, maybe let's start with Kiana, because you're to the left of me on the screen. Can you tell us, what's your role in the Free Homayoun campaign, and how did you get involved in this kind of stuff?
Yes, I'm Kiana. I can be recognized by the thick voice, I think, very easily. So I've been, I think, an activist since my youth, also because my parents were refugees themselves. So it was more or less not a choice for me to become involved in the case of migration and especially racism in Germany. And I met Mahtab 2 years ago in the Women Life Freedom Collective Berlin during the uprisings in Iran, the feminist uprisings in Iran. And I learned about the story of her father. And for me, it was also as a feminist part of be trying to support the uprisings in Iran, but supporting a dear friend or sister of mine was also part of I see it as part of my responsibility as a feminist, activist, anti-racist. So that's how I became involved.
What's your role with the campaign, Kiana?
I think the four of us, Mahtab is the founder, of course, but the four of us have all the same role. We're engaging ourselves in the campaign and try to work with each other. We have also other supporters, like who work, for example, on the website and something, but I think the four of us are the main core of the campaign and trying to push this forward. And trying to support Mahtab especially. And yes.
Okay, brilliant. And then Anna, can you how about you? Can you tell us about your background and how you got involved in this?
I'm Anne, and I'm an activist at Seebrucke, Switzerland, and we try to draw attention to the issues of migration and to show the role of Switzerland in it. And at a meeting of Seebrucke, Darius from the Juventa crew drew our attention to the issue of criminalizing migrants at the external borders of Europe. So Hannah and I were planning a series of events in Switzerland where we wanted the people who are criminalized to have their voices heard. And through Borderline Europe, we made some contacts, which is how we met Marta. So we invited her to come to Switzerland to participate in a series of events. And the title of these events was Iran Europe Prison. And it was very emotional to hear her story. So we couldn't leave it at that. And so we launched the campaign together. And it was in beginning of 2023, I think. And our first day of action with the campaign was in last June.
Well, thanks very much for that, Anna. And Mahtab, you're the founder of this campaign, I think. Can you tell us a bit of your background story?
Yes, I wouldn't. First of all, I think I don't like myself being described as the founder of the campaign because I don't think that's the case. And as Anna said, we met in Switzerland, and I think Anna had the idea of having it happen. So I think I would, like, if anything, like I wouldn't go that way. But anyways, I come from a background of music. I've studied classical piano before, and I'm a musician mainly and a social worker. And as Kiana mentioned, me and Kiana met in this collective, like Woman Life Freedom Collective, where it was kind of the beginning, I think, of my activism or anything related to that, as I haven't been doing much of it before. Like in Iran, a bit of it, but also it's not really possible to do it there. So yes, and kind of short before this uprising in Iran, this thing with my dad happened. So I was already like very much engaged in it, but I still didn't have means to do something about it. And I think like by these connections with Borderline Europe and also like a couple of interviews that I did after the trial of my father, which was in September 2022, I started getting a little bit active about it, or just like a little bit more public about it. And that was around the time that I met Anne and then Hannah. And that's also where we kind of started this campaign. Yes. And then Kiana joined us a month after we started.
Thanks for that, Mahtab. I didn't say actually at the beginning of this episode, but Homayoun is your father. And I think we'll talk a bit about more about that later on. Thanks for that, Mahtab. And then finally, Hannah, could you tell us a bit about your background and how you got involved in all of this?
So I think it's not going to be so much different from what you've heard already. I'm also based in Switzerland, and I'm working with Anne for the past 4 years probably, or already on topics of migration and legal or like safe passages and safe harbors in Switzerland. And we were trying to think what topics we can focus on and what topics are still on the plan. We still haven't talked about a lot in terms of migration and racism and systematization of deterrence and isolation. And then I think because it was we've heard a lot about cases from Juventa, from Samos, from Moria, and we thought this is a practice that is increasing more and more on European level. And as Seebrucke, Switzerland, we decided to get involved. And luckily we met Mahtab to start something. And yes,
Oh, great, thanks, Hannah. You just mentioned, I think you mentioned Samos there. Would that be the Samos 3? The Moria, which was the Samos 2, which I think I've done an episode about. I can't remember. I'll have links in the thing. We mentioned Moria, which I haven't done anything about, I don't think. And there's something else you mentioned there, but when I'm editing, I can have links to these episodes that we've done before on the Civil Fleet podcast. Well, it's brilliant to meet you all. Thank you so much for coming on. This is quite an unusual episode, but I'm quite excited about it. Never had 4 people on before, but this is going to be good. So let's start. Let's talk about Homayoun Sabetara. Hopefully, I've said his name correctly. We know it's Mahtab's father, and I know he's from Iran. Can we have a little bit more background about him? Can we talk about why he left Iran and then about his journey, maybe? But let's talk about his background first, and then we'll talk about his journey.
Okay, sure. Yes, Homayoun is my father. He is gonna be 60 in a month, I think, in a month and a half, actually. Yeah, so he had me when he was 30, if that's relevant. About him as a person, well, he used to be, or like he still kind of is a positive person, I would say. Like he's a person who kind of is very cheeky, I would say. Like he's very funny, he jokes around a lot, and he's mostly, he can be very quiet sometimes, but most of the time, like when he's spending time with us, he's a kind of a cheerful person. He used to, so I lost my mother when I was 18 because she had cancer. And after that time, we had a really rough time with my father and my sibling. I think he started getting a bit, just a bit depressed after my mother died. And around those years, his background was like, he studied chemistry in the university. He then started his work also in something related to chemistry, but he didn't really like it, so he switched to software engineering. For a while, kind of for most of his life, he did software engineering and had his own kind of company. And then at the same time, he also worked at the airport and the manager of one part of the airport. But then when the government changed, so like we had a kind of it wasn't a left, like Iran after the revolution never had a proper left government, but like kind of a center, like middle, like I think 10, 15 years after the revolution, you could call it like left in the context of Iran, but not really. So after that government changed to something more rights, like a right-wing government, he lost his job because his position at the airport was quite an important position, and then he lost it because it normally works like that it's like a relative-based kind of system that you kind of lose the important positions and then it was given to someone else. So he continued with his company, like with the software engineering company that he had on the side. But as years passed, he like also there his whole company was like confiscated because he was becoming a bit prominent or like earned a lot of money with it. And then they asked, like the government asked for part of the money. That never happened because he didn't want to do it. And then he completely like confiscated his own property from him, so he couldn't continue working in that office anymore. And it was around the time that my mom was sick, and then my mom died after 4 years. And after that time, he, of course, continued working for different places, but he was already 50. He was like just a bit more fragile after my mom's death. So he could not really hold things together. And he also got sick around the time, like I think 2-3 years after my mom died. He also got cancer, and then he had a surgery and like all the, everything after that. So at the time it was stopped, like his cancer was good, like the surgery was successful, but still he had to like be under control and take medication and every year like do the yearly checkup. So this took a while, and then that was like I think after 5 years after he got cancer, I left Iran for Germany to study in Heidelberg as I like studied there and for my master's. And then my dad was, I think, just not doing great with this decision. I was also super worried about his own health issues, being alone, like being a widower, and just also like having lost his job and everything that he has built up to that point. I think that brought him to a point where he kind of felt the need to join his family, because my sibling was also already gone, like was also because they also came to Germany. So so he decided to come to stay with us and to just maybe try to live in Germany. And he asked me if there's any legal way, in quotation marks, to come to Germany. And I searched for all the possible options. There's no option out there, so there are no legal routes for someone who wants to migrate. And especially at his age, and also the fact that he doesn't know the language, he doesn't have those like expertise, whatever you call it, that they need for a job visa. Yeah. And at some point he decided to come, so he goes to Turkey, and he tries to kind of inform himself about the options there. And and then he finds a person who promises him for money that he will bring him to Greece, and from there he can maybe continue his journey, and then that's where the whole story happens. So I will maybe stop with the background, and then later I can continue the whole story.
Yeah, thanks, Mahtab. That was really detailed, and thanks for that. I know it can be too difficult to talk about family issues and things like that, so thanks so much for telling us about that. I'm really sorry that you lost your mum at a young age. That must have been awful. And you mentioned something quite important there. There's no legal routes. There was no legal routes for him to come, and I think that's something people listening to this podcast will be very aware of that. But if someone's new to this podcast, maybe they're just trying out something new. I don't know. Can anyone talk about the lack of safe routes into Europe? Because I know that's a huge issue, and I know it from a UK context. It's very difficult for people to get here. Unless they're already here or something. But yeah, I don't know. Does anyone want to say something about the lack of safe routes?
I could say something.
Yes, please, Hannah.
Because I think this has been like a strategy that the EU has been trying to implement for the last 20, 30 years, or every year a bit more. And the idea, I think, of what has been happening is to push the external borders of the EU further outside of the actual geographical EU territory. So when it was in maybe like 10, 15 years ago, there was still a lot of checkups and border control in Greece and Italy, which still is the case. Now the EU tries to make more and more agreements with third countries, like Algeria, Morocco, Egypt, and to have the securitization and the militarization of the borders in a different place and even further outside Europe, because the idea is to not have people make the trajectory over the Mediterranean or over the Balkans, but to stay in the countries and have their asylum processes started and finished already in that same place, and not even let people reach Europe and get to Europe. And regarding the safe passages as well, there is, like Mahtab has said, there is no possibilities for people to apply for visa. To get a Schengen visa is kind of a really racial process or racialized process, when you have to apply from a certain country and then you get visa on arrival, and in another country you have to show that you have funds of several hundreds of thousands of euros to even enter Europe. And I think that is also one of the aspects. And besides the militarization, the non-giving out of visa, and then the brutal deterrence of people to not come to Europe. And I think one example would be there also the collaboration with the so-called Libyan Coast Guards from the Italian government, that they have been doing also for several years, the cooperation with really brutal strategies and mechanisms to bring people back to a country that is definitely not called a safe country, because Libya is a country where there is civil war happening for several years. And all of this together makes that people, instead of being able to look for safety and some place where you can start an asylum process, so basically apply or get your rights that you have as a human being, that you have to risk exploitative, life-threatening, and illegalized routes that don't let you enter Europe as a person, like every person who has a passport or wants to visit Europe, but as a criminalized, illegalized, in quotation mark both, person, who will always be reduced to this aspect in the end and after their arrival.
Yeah, I know the case in the UK, it's very difficult even to just come as a tourist. For people from some countries, they'll just reject it straight away. Even when people, like, if you have a UK, I'm sure this is the same across Europe actually, but in the UK, like if you're married to someone from a non-EU country, it's very, very difficult to bring them into the UK. So yeah, the situation is crazy, and it's a systematic, horrible situation, right?
And can I add something?
Yes, Kiana, please.
Because, sir, I just wanted to add, because Hannah, you correctly said that this has been the case for 20, 30 years. And I think this has actually been the case since the origin of the foundation of the EU. Like couple of weeks ago, I found some old newspapers where activists in the 80s wrote that with the Schengen Agreement, which was like basically the foundation of the European Union later, that with the Schengen Agreement, the right to seek for asylum in Europe is basically eliminated. And so by opening the inner borders, the European Union, like it was in their, how can you say, in a plan maybe, by opening the inner borders to fortify the outer borders. And I think this is really important to say, because the slogans that we have today are still the same slogans that activists would use in the 80s and 90s. And still every year it's getting worse and worse. Yes, but it was part of the European Union to eliminate the possibilities to seek for asylum in Europe as a third, how to say, Drittstaatenangehöriger.
I think is a third
country national.
Yes, as a third country national. Thank you, Hannah.
Yes, and also there's like I think there's a racialized aspect to this. I wasn't born in Europe. I was born in the United States. My mother's British, my father's American. So my citizenship comes from my mother. But it's never ever a problem for me. I have a British passport. I got one easily. And so and as a white, straight, cisgendered man, borders have never been an issue for me. And this is one of the reasons why I want to do this podcast, is to something to help this terrible situation.
And I think it's not just a racialized aspect. It's the systematic racism and the post-colonial violence that we're seeing. Like, yes, so it's more than just an aspect. But I think that is what you mentioned. That is what you, wanted to say.
Yeah, thanks, Kiana. And then I think let's move on to the next question, unless there was anything else you wanted to add. Shall we continue with the next bit? Great. So when we left Homayoun, he was in Turkey looking for a way to get to Greece. And I think, as it says on your website, he made it to Greece in a car, and then he was arrested. But maybe we can talk about the journey and how he ended up in Greece in this car.
Yes, so as I mentioned, he goes to Turkey first, tries to find someone with whom he can kind of cross the border, and then, as I said, like this, he finds a person who promises him to help him cross the border while he gets money from him. And then they start going with a group. I mean, the details of the story are still unknown to me because I haven't been there myself, so I have no idea how it might have looked like, but these are the things that my dad has told me. So yes, they start going with a group, and then they cross the border, I think, through the Evros River, and then they arrive at a forest. And in the forest, they had to stay for 3 days without basically food or water. Like all they had was chocolate and then the river from which they could drink water. And after 3 days, the person who took them would tell them that there's a car coming, and that from now, like from here, from this place, from this forest, they have to drive a car to reach the city in Greece. So basically, they were already in Greece, as far as I understood, but they still weren't in the city, and they were kind of hiding in a forest. So at that point, he, like, because the group wasn't that big, like I think 7 people, so 7 or 8 people. So at that point, he asks my father, or like tells my father that my father has to drive the car, since he was older, since he was a man, and since he had experience with driving and he had a driving license. And first, my father like refuses, but also at the same time, he didn't know the consequences, or like he didn't really know what's gonna happen next. So at some point he says yes, because he also didn't pay the whole money. Like the deal was that he pays half of the money in Thessaloniki, or like in Greece when they arrive. So at some point he accepts it, and then he gets in the car with seven other people, and he gets all the material that he needs for the trip, like the GPS, I think some cell phone even, to talk to, like, so what he gets told is that he should drive the car for 2 hours, and then he would be contacted from another person who would be waiting for them in Thessaloniki, like in this Greek city. And they start driving, like he starts driving, and then at some point the police start following them, I think because they suspected that this person doesn't look Greek, or like that the whole car is quite full. I'm not sure for what reason, but the police kind of follows them and then tells them to like put the car aside, and yeah, that's the point where he and everyone else gets arrested. But as he was the only person who was driving the car, gets like they hold him in the detention center and let everyone else go, and also like make them kind of confess, or like say who was the driver. So this is also in the documents of my father, because they have asked the people who have been in the car, like who was the driver, and then some of them said him, and some of them just said that they don't want to answer this question. And also in that situation, I think words are put into people's mouths. There's no actual translation. You know, there is a lot of pressure for people to just want to like get out of detention centers. So they kind of get pushed into this thing of like saying who, or like maybe the question was, because I think one person has said, or like there is some problem with these documents, because as far as I remember, like there's one part where someone has said that he hasn't seen my dad in forest, which is like not because they were all together in this forest. So like people just get very pushed and forced and like stressed out about answering questions which they don't basically understand, because it's all in Greek, and I'm really sure that none of them could speak proper Greek, and there was no translation. So yeah, that's what happened. Then also, like later in the court, actually they brought in the police officer who was there on the day investigating everyone. And what he said was that he doesn't even remember my dad as the driver. Like that's how blurry the whole thing is, and that's how strict they put their judgment on. Like this is the document that's being like kind of used to sentence my dad to 18 years of prison, and that's basically a false document. Like yeah, of course he drove the car, but he didn't organize the whole journey. He did not like make people, or like force people, or like he didn't smuggle people into the country. He wasn't like, he didn't, you know, traffic like people without them consenting, or like he wasn't even part of the organizational like hasn't done anything to do with that. So yeah, that's what happened. And then later After 2 weeks, they transfer him already to prison without any trial. So like he stays in the detention center for 2 weeks. We didn't have any contact to him for the time being, like that time. And then I kind of got a phone call after 2 weeks from someone who, yeah, that's another story. Like, doesn't really matter. From a friend of mine who was also in contact with my father, and he used to live in Thessaloniki. So my dad called him because he had a Greek number, and then this person called me and told me that my dad is in a refugee center. So that's what he said. Because my dad didn't tell me that he's in prison for the first 8 months. I think he was just very shocked and like thought that he's gonna come out, and he didn't want to make us worry. So that's the story that he gave us in the beginning. And so after 2 weeks, they already bring him into Koidalos, which is a prison near Athens. And then he stays there for a year before the trial. So like the pre-trial detention was 1 year without them having actually given him the like sentence. Yes, and then in a year, like in September 2022, we were in front of the court after the court being postponed for 3 times already.
Yeah, that is a crazy story, and really terrible treatment. And so yeah, and this is happening a lot in Greece. I've interviewed people on the podcast who were accused of, capsizing in a boat, and all they did was touch the steering wheel. And there's lots of people in Europe that are being arrested for being smugglers, but in fact, they're absolutely not smugglers whatsoever. They just momentarily touched the wheel, steered a boat slightly, or even just saved people's lives. And I know this is happening a lot in Greece, right? And I think it's probably happening elsewhere in Europe. That I think it's happened a few times in the UK as well, when people have crossed the channel. Is there? I don't know. Could anyone talk about the systematicness of this nature of people? I don't know, why is Europe charging people for steering boats or driving cars?
Yeah, I can add something.
Thanks, Anna.
In 2015, the European Commission decided to prioritize the fight against smuggling and international crime. And so the number of officially recorded deaths increased to over 5,000 the following years. So it calls the question of effectiveness of such anti-smuggling approaches, because the stricter EU laws, such as facilitating of illegal entry, lead to people being arrested as soon as they arrive in Europe, without knowledge of the alleged crime they are accused of, and without the possibility of legal support. So that border violence of the EU makes migrants depend on these smugglers. And at the same time, EU says they want to fight against smuggling, but it's more a fight against migration. And I can say something about the charges against Homayoun. His main charge was assisting the unauthorized entry of 7 third country nationals. And when he testified that he drove the car because he could not pay the full amount of money, acting for profit was added as an additional circumstance. And as these were 3 people on the back of a car, he was also charged with the serious offense of endangering the lives of others. So according to Greek law, he was therefore facing 50 years in prison for each person transported, and that meaning a total around 100 years in prison. And yeah, unfortunately, Homayoun's case is not an isolated one. So countless people have already been judged and imprisoned for years on the basis of this interpretation of people smuggling the EU created, regardless of the fact that they were trying to bring themselves and others to safety, as you mentioned. And many organizations have documented the charging of refugees arriving on the Greek islands with such offenses has been systematically practiced by Greek state for several years. The arrests that follows these often unfounded accusations of smuggling are often random, and the trials usually violate basic standards of fairness. And in that study Borderline Europe made last year, they said that in the Greek courts, the trials last on average just 38 minutes and result in average sentences of 44 years and fines of over 370,000 euros against migrants who are accused of smuggling. So it's a very systematically way to fight against migration. Yeah, sorry, that may be a little bit long.
No, that was great, Anne. Thanks very much. I mean, it's just we had on the podcast before a guy from Somalia who was, I think he was arrested in Greece and he was charged with 142 years in prison for steering a boat. I think his name was Hanad. So I'll have a link for people listening to listen to that episode. But yeah, it's crazy, and this is happening not just in Greece, right? I think it's happening across Europe. And yeah, it's just it boggles my mind because obviously I don't want to stop migration. I think migration is a great thing. But if you wanted to stop migration, this is not going to work. It's not going to do anything. It's just going to harm people. It's just awful. Yeah, crazy. And then also, I think, if we move on next to Homayoun's trial and what happened then, because I think there's a lack of translation that happened for him. This is not just happened to Homayoun. This is happening to people all over Europe, right, that have been charged with this crime of smuggling or assisting illegal migration or whatever it is. So can we talk about the trial and the unfairness of the trial?
Sure. So the trial was originally planned for, I think it was 12th of May, 2022, which would be kind of 7-8 months after the event already. So that was the first date. And like as soon as I it was actually 2 years ago. Like my dad only told me that he's in prison 2 years ago on 1st of April. So I was thinking about it like some days ago, but it was 1st of April for this whole thing. I just realized 2 years ago. Yeah, exactly. So that was around the time that he told me, and then he already had not enough time to maybe find a lawyer and then find all the connections, and also for us, like to just realize what has happened was quite shocking. So it took us like maybe 2 weeks to kind of digest it and then try to find connections. And then that's where we came across Borderline Europe, because I had some friends who were kind of connected to them. Yeah, so through them we could get some support. We could find a lawyer. Like they would talk to us and explain to us what has actually happened. And I wasn't believing it at the beginning, but then when I got all these articles and like all these sentences for people, I kind of started to think, yeah, maybe, yeah. But then still, I was thinking, like what? So story, like it cannot be. But anyways, so we got the dates for 12th of May, and then we went to Thessaloniki for the trial. The trial didn't happen. I don't remember. Like every time there was a reason where they postponed the trial. So this was the first time, and then of course there was no translation. We were just in front of the court, like understanding nothing. My dad understanding nothing about his whole life being kind of planned. But yeah, the trial got cancelled in the first few minutes. I'm not sure why. There was a reason for. I think the owner of the car or something wasn't showing up, or like because the car had an owner apparently who was Greek. I don't know. We also didn't really find out until the very end who was this person, like who was the owner of the car, like why wasn't he? Because he was also in the case, but he was kind of acquitted immediately in the first appearance he made in the court. Yeah, so because although he did it, so like the thing was that his car was apparently stolen as he claimed, but he didn't go to the police for it. So he only went when my dad was caught. Yeah, that's how the story went. So like my dad was caught, and the same day he goes to the police and kind of claims that his car has been stolen, which is super weird. And I don't really know what has happened then. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to also like judge based on, just nothing that I don't know, but like it sounded strange to me that they didn't really inform the police that their car was stolen, whatever. So yeah, this was the case in the first trial, and then they gave us another date for 3 weeks later, which was beginning of June. We went there. The trial was postponed to the next day because of a strike, whatever. And then the next day we went there, and then it was again postponed for a month. And then in July we went there. Again, like it was 4th of July, we went there, and then again it was postponed for 2 other months, like for September. Yes, so it was postponed to 26th of September 2022, and that was the last time that it was. Yeah, and it actually took place, and everyone was present, all the lawyers and everything. So yeah, so in front of the court, it took a bit longer than it normally takes, as Anna mentioned in this borderline study. They like the statistic is that they only take 38 minutes. Like as a like yeah, and for my dad, I think it took 1 hour 30 minutes or 25 minutes at least. Like my Zeugenaussage, how do you say that? Like does anyone know the word?
Witness statement.
Yes, thank you. The witness statement in front of the court took kind of like 25 minutes because the judge was questioning me like, I don't know, 4 times about the same things. Like she would just go on and ask me questions and like try to kind of stress the whole situation, or like make it very stressful. So yeah, and my dad had translation because we tried to organize it for him, but we didn't have any translation. So we were sitting in the front of the court, understanding nothing. I only understood when they called my name, and I had to go in front because I was also outside in the beginning. Like I couldn't really be in the room as it was happening, although I didn't understand the language. But so they called me, and I went in and I talked for 25 minutes, and then afterwards we basically understood nothing. We had a friend who could speak Greek, but also she couldn't translate very fast. Like she couldn't hear things well, and it was just a chaos. Yeah, so at some point we had to go out and wait for an hour for them to, just announce the actual results. And then I remember at the time, because so our lawyer was a pretty good lawyer, and he did I think a great job, or like a good defense. And I remember when we had to do this 1 hour and like waiting outside, a policeman in the room came to my father, came to our lawyer and told him that the lawyer told us later, and told him, yeah, he's not guilty, is he? Like, why is he here? Like, he looks, he's quite old. I don't know. Like, I don't think, because it's obvious that he's innocent. Like, he hasn't, like, he's not a smuggler or whatever. And yeah, and then the lawyer told this to us afterwards. I was like, yeah, I think it's pretty, it looks pretty good that he's, like, it's obvious that he's not, and the judge kind of knows it, so he's not going to get more than 5 years, let's say, which would be also already, like, part of it would be gone because he was already in pretrial detention for a year. Yeah, and then what happened was that we went back in. First, they announced, I think first they said 20 years, and then they reduced it for 2 years, 1 year because he's sick, like with a history of cancer, and the other reason being my witness statement in front of the court and the presence of family, basically, which I would guess is something that many people don't have access to. Like, many people who come to Europe don't have any family members in front of the court, don't have the chance to, have even translation. And like all these things that we had, like even have a good lawyer, like having the money to have a good lawyer, having the support for it, like we didn't have to pay for it. Borderline Europe supported us a lot in this process. I cannot imagine how it looks like for people who don't have those things, which are the minimum, like which is the minimum of, at least understanding what's happening to you when you're in front of the court. When they're, giving you a sentence of 20 years or 18 years, like at least to understand it, like that's a very big point, which is not being taken care of, or like I think systematically neglected also for people who are criminalized in their migration routes.
Yeah, it's terrible. This lack of translation. I know this is happening a lot in courts across Europe. I know that it happened with the Juventa as well, and they were all, Europeans in Italy on trial for alleged human smuggling, which is obviously bollocks. And they were that one always baffles me because they're in they don't border each other, Germany and Italy, as far as I know. But they should have been easy to get a translator there. But for people like your father coming from Iran, where the language is completely different between the Iranian and Greek, yeah, it's just crazy. And I know this is happening a lot across Europe, and it's locking people away. Was there, Mahtab, was there I don't know much about the law, to be honest, but was there in the court case, was it a jury or was there just a judge presiding? Like how did they come to that decision that he was guilty?
So there was the main judge, and then there were two people. I think one of them a prosecutor, and the other one, I'm not sure how they called her. Like, I think the translation would have been the official secretary or something of the court. I don't really know. Like the Greek translator kind of told us that too. So they made a joint decision at the end, with the judge having more weight into the decision than the other two. And as far as we knew, or like we got told, the judge was quite, a strict judge, I would say, and had kind of fascist tendencies. So like that, like our lawyer told us later, that also like, it was just very, that Thessaloniki doesn't have, because in some places, like I think, for example, in Samos, correct me if I'm wrong, there are just more, like, less strict judges. Like there's the possibility of less strict judges, but in Thessaloniki, as far as I've understood, because it's also very dependent on where the trial is taking place, and in the city that it took place for my father, it's mainly just very but this is all like common, like street knowledge that we have. So like I'm not really sure if it's really proven or like if it's really the case, but this is what we've been told.
Yeah, and it's crazy to me that the decision for 18 years is rested on like three people's, decision. So yeah, and then now you have your appeal, and the appeal is, I think, later this month. We're recording on April the 5th, and I read this morning, but I've forgotten. But I think it's like a couple of weeks away, right? The appeal, 2 or 3 weeks away, right? I don't know if anyone could talk about the appeal process and how you think it's going to
go. Shall I say something?
Yes, Kiana.
Okay.
Have you got your voice?
Yeah, no, it's working. The appeal process. So this is what we, as the campaign, have been working towards to raise a lot of public awareness for this appeal process, because Homayoun is one of around 2,000 unnamed people who are in prison in Greece right now, and we don't know their faith. And so this appeal process is directly addressed to Homayoun, but it is also a symbol, or should be like a symbol for all the unnamed people who were accused for alleged smuggling. And the other part is that we heard a lot that public awareness can influence a lot the judge's judgment. So this is what we've been trying to do. Like we have a lot of, in the past 2 years, we tried to connect with different NGOs and organizations, first in Germany and then in whole Europe, in Italy and in Greece, and try to just to highlight this topic, because it's also in Greece, it's not very known about this. There's just this narrative of the evil smuggler, and there's not much information about how, like, on the one hand, Europe creates first the need of smuggling because there are no legal passages to Europe, and on the other hand condemns smuggling, and Yes, and then there's a third layer of people being accused of smuggler who weren't smuggler but migrants themselves, as Anna already pointed out. So there's there's a lack of knowledge about that. Yes, and the case, the appeal process is on April 22nd. Yeah, basically 2-3 weeks, not even 3 weeks, to support like the acquittal of Homayoun was the public awareness that we tried to raise, which I already mentioned, but we also came up with a team of 3 lawyers, because more eyes see more in the court and can support each other, and also this is also might have an impact of the juries of the judge's judgment when they see, oh wow, there are a lot of people involved, and also for them, like, they don't want to have that much stress, and when they see a lot of public eyes are on this day on the court, and also there are 3 engaged lawyers, this might help the case. The problem is we still don't know if it's going to happen on April 22nd or if they're going to postpone it again night before, which happens a lot, and which happens, yeah, with the first trial. And but still, we're trying all that we can to make it even more political than it is, because Homayoun's conviction was a political statement. It was not based on it didn't have any legal foundation. It was merely political to condemning people as smuggler has its only purpose to make people afraid of migration, which is also their basic rights, and people have been migrating since the dawn of humanity. And so it was political, the whole court process of Homayoun, and what we are trying to do is make it even more political and raise awareness. And I mean, I read a quote a couple of weeks ago, I think it was from Borderline Europe. They said, if human rights were for everyone, Homayoun would be free. And that's the case. Like, we're not even asking a big thing, we're asking for the basic human rights. So yes, have I answered your question?
Yes, I think so. But then I have a million more questions to ask. So yeah, I first heard of the campaign to free Homayoun when I was with, I think I'd seen it on Twitter and stuff, and I'd looked at it, and I think I maybe shared some of your content on my social media feed. But then it really came to me when I was in Trapani with the Juventa crew, and we held the banners, the free Homayoun. So I think it's so important to like what your campaign's been doing is to raise awareness. It's really, really important to get people to know, and also to hopefully put pressure on the judges to know that they're, people are paying attention to this case. So yeah. Can
I mean, not also.
No, go on, carry on.
Sorry, no. And really, this case as a symbol, or as an example of all the other cases, this is what is really important to us. Like, Homayoun Sabetara is a person that we have been fighting for 2 or 3 years, but we've been at the same time fighting for all the other unnamed prisoners at the same time, and we've been fighting against the criminalisation of migration. So we hope that after us, a lot of campaigns will follow us and do the work. And yeah.
I wanted to add that to the appeal trial. Besides having 3 lawyers, there will be some trial observers there, and we will invite the media to report on it. So we want to be sure that there can't be an invisible decision there that nobody sees, so that at the end, Homayoun's case will hopefully help many others after.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope so too. And yeah, one thing I thought of that we talked about this, the court case being cancelled or postponed. I think this has happened a lot. I think I've been aware of it happening to the Moria 6, I think. And it's also happened to Sean Binder and Sarah Mandini as well, and the other people involved in that. I know that their case keeps getting postponed. They're just 2, but I'm sure there's like hundreds that this is happening to. I really hope when it comes to obviously I hope that he's freed in this appeal. But I also hope it's not postponed, because it can have a negative effect on campaigns, right? It can lead to burnout and this kind of thing.
Could I add something to this? Because I
yes,
think
please, Hannah.
that's also interesting like we've talked to some trial observers, and for them it was already like super clear, of course, the process or the trial is going to be postponed. Like, what do we know from Greece? Is this? And I think that's also like some systematization behind it to like deal or like play with people's physical state of mind, to make them be prepared for one day and then postpone it, and then just very short, you don't know how long, it could be like a couple of days, it could be a couple of months, and then it happens again and again, and there's always some reason that makes sense, and for them at least, or like on a superficial way. And the crazy thing is also about the trial that for Homayoun is going to come up on the 22nd. We only know the date. We still don't know the time. Like, they don't let us know about the time in advance. But as Mahtab has said, like, we sometimes we show up at like in the early morning at 8:30 in front of the court, and then they tell us like at what time the court starts. So there's no plan and guarantees. You don't have any security in preparing yourself properly with an adequate time and an adequate like invitation and scheduling. It is like limbo of yes or no, and you're supposed as a member, as a relative, as a friend, as a person in solidarity, you have to adjust to whatever state authorities tell you, and whatever that is what comes up, and that in that moment you have to be ready and you have to be prepared and you have to be there, and if it's not that moment, then no one cares.
Yeah, and added to that, the whole financial, I mean, it's a psychological torture on a high level, and then also the financial aspects. I mean, we were lucky to get some donations from people so that we can cover at least the fees of the lawyers, and but still, like, who can afford to fly to Greece 2, 3, 4 times to support their family members, and who can support to be there? Like, this is a lot of money we're talking about, and it just adds to the whole psychological stress, and to this whole systematic border violence, I would say, systematic criminalization of migration.
Yeah, absolutely. Keep like postponing the trial all the time will have like such a detrimental effect on you, not only like mentally but also financially as well. Having to fly to Greece constantly, it's not a good thing, right? Obviously. I think I've asked everything I wanted to ask apart from my final questions. So I know we could keep talking about this. There's so much stuff to cover, but this is your opportunity. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you think I should ask? Was there anything you wanted to talk about before we move on to the final question here?
I think maybe I'm gonna say something more general.
Yes, please.
Because in this whole, while we are talking about smuggling, I think for us as a campaign, it's really important, and I want to emphasize that it's not the people who are criminal, but that's the European Union that should be held accountable for its shady and criminal actions. So if the European Union is really interested in fighting smuggling, they should address the horrible conditions that force people in the first place to flee from their home places, because nobody does that just out of I don't know, because they feel like it. So they should address the horrible conditions, and until then they have to create safe passages for people on the flight. This is the only way, if they're really interested in fighting smuggling, this is the only way how you can fight smuggling.
Yeah, and also stop I need to add this, and also stop their Waffen exports. What's that? How is that in English?
Arms export.
Yeah, to other countries. Just as a first step to think about, like something small to think about. Don't do your wars in other countries.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same corporations, right? They're first export the arms, and then when people have to fly, it's the same companies that help Frontex Europe to again help people back from coming to Europe. So it's just horrifying, absurd capitalism, everything.
I think the maximum, or like the what you like the I don't even know the word in English, but like what the EU has done with CS now, with the new reform of the asylum system, that if a country does not want to take people based on a certain distribution mechanism, then instead they are allowed to pay for every person they do not want to take, to send police officers and border security mechanisms to that country in turn of not taking people. I mean, that's the complete absurdity of the whole system, that there is the obligation to take people, you can have the right to apply for asylum, and in return, if you don't want to do it, then you just strengthen and fortify all of militarism and all of the securitization body that is already growing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you talked about the arms trade, and Europe's behind a lot of wars in the world and a lot of inequality that we've caused through colonialism and things like this. And so, a lot of the reason that people flee their countries is because of situations that have happened in European countries of the United States, etc. So yeah, we're not only are we forcing people to flee, but we're stopping them from arriving, and then it's the same companies in many cases that are blowing people up and that are also stopping them from crossing the borders. It's a really terrible situation, and one day in the future I hope people can look back at this and be like, we'll be horrified in the same way that we're horrified by slavery and this kind of stuff. That's what I hope in the future. I don't know if that's going to happen. So
I think also,
yes, Kiana,
sorry
yes.
to interrupt you all the time. I think, I really hope that too. And I think a part where we can start is right now, especially in Germany, we see a lot of demonstrations against the rise of right-wing groups and right-wing parties. And so there's a lot of engagement in the streets, and this is great. But what about the actions of the European Union? And I think by addressing right extremism, neo-fascism, we have also to address the systematic racism that is covered by the European Union with code words like equality, freedom, blah, blah, blah. So let's start there. Let's by addressing the right-wing groups. Let's also start to address what has been implemented in the society as systematic racism, because that is the what is nurturing all the right-wing the right of the rights in whole Europe.
Yeah, well said, Kiana. Thank you very much. Okay, so the appeal is on April 22nd. We'll be following it. I will be in Bosnia, I think, at that time, covering something else, but I'll try to be present and pay attention to what's happening in the case. We'll be sharing this podcast around, and hopefully people know more, will spread the word more about it and get more attention on what's happening. So my last question I like to ask people at the end of the podcast, a big question, which is not very easy to answer, but I always like to hear people's opinions. And on the future, I don't know, maybe you could talk, I don't know who wants to talk about this, but how do you see the future, not only for your case, for Free Homayoun, for Homayoun Sabetara. It's going to need a lot of editing, me here. So not only about his case and what's happening to him, but to people on the move across Europe. I don't know, could anyone talk about the future, and can anyone give us a ray of hope? Because the situation seems so bleak to me. Mahtab, I think you look like you're ready to
I'm not hopeful. I'm not gonna give you hope. I don't know. I think it looks horrific. I mean, look at it now. Look at all all the right-wing politics, rising up everywhere. Basically, I think I think we're just in an era where we're lucky enough to just survive. Or I don't think. I mean, I think I personally am just maybe also not the greatest person to ask, because I'm not home, and I haven't been, and I'm not gonna be, unless something happens, which is just very surprising. But I'm not sure that would ever happen. Yeah, unless until I'm alive. Maybe I will live for 100 years and then things will change. But I'm not sure.
Kiana, yes, please.
Maybe a little bit of hope. I think what gives me hope is that all these systems are people made. So it's also in our hands to change them. And when I look back at the history, people so often thought it's not possible to change a system, like monarchy, for example. It was just something that was given by God, and we were abolished in some countries to abolish monarchism or slavery. But I mean, we can still talk about neocolonialism, forms of slavery that are happening right now, but still people never thought that we can abolish slavery. So this gives me hope that all these systems are people made and we can change it. And but just stepping one step forward, we are not powerless. We have the power, and it starts with talking about this with our friends and family members. And just not letting all this system crush us by thinking, okay, they have more power than us. We have power. And this is what, I don't know, hope, but maybe enables me to move forward and not get desperate.
I
Yes.
think I also have a very small spark of hope, although I think I'm more with Mahtab and I don't really see a lot of hope. Also because I feel, maybe first the negative side, because I feel like there's like everything that we do is like going backwards a bit in terms of migration policies and asylum procedures. We've had a standard and now we're restricting rights again and again. And once we have restricted rights, or once governments have restricted rights, it's very hard to go back. Like there's the move to going more into securitization, but there's never a move to going back away from securitization. And but what gives me the hope, or what I see, and like the precarity of all this work that we're doing unpaid and in our free time, and is that yes, governments or like state officials are not taking over these roles and this work, but there are so many civil society based groups and collectives that are doing this work. And now this can be a critical point as well, because I mean, it should not be the work, unpaid work for civil society to take over what is state responsibility. But at the same time, there's a huge solidarity among the groups. And I think that's what we have also seen, or at least for my case, I've seen in the campaign, how much solidarity we have received from people from all over. Like we're now based in Switzerland and Germany, but the trial is in Greece, and everywhere in all three countries, even more like in France and Italy, we have received solidarity. And I'm talking to people over about the campaign who I've never met at all. I just received a contact from another person who were willing to share their contacts. And now I've daily contact to people I've never seen. I don't know, but they are so open in sharing their contacts and in sharing their time and their resources that they have. And I think that's, for me, that's the thing that amazes me every day. And that gives me like little goosebumps, and talking about it, that I feel, yeah, I'm not alone. We're not alone in this. And there are people that think differently, and people that want to change things, and people that are not satisfied with or do not want to accept how the situation is going. And I think all of the people, just knowing that there's someone out there that is not like the rest of everything that you hear every day in the media, I think is maybe something positive or hopeful.
Yeah, I agree with Hannah. It gives us hope to see that so many people support the campaign, and that they see the connection between many of the current problems and are willing to take action. And on a legal level, it gives some hope that one of our lawyers, Dimitris Koulis, had some successes in Samos, where the court has ruled that asylum seekers cannot be smugglers. And this gives us some hope, but it still seems to be a long way of that system will change.
Well, thanks very much. Yeah, I agree. Like for me, it always seems good that we shouldn't be doing this. We shouldn't be having this conversation. We shouldn't be doing this podcast. We should be just enjoying ourselves. But the fact that we're fighting against it, that often gives me hope. But yeah, sometimes I think it's hard to focus on that kind of thing when everything feels so shit. Kiana, Anna, Mahtab, and Hannah, that was really, really good to speak to you all. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me. And thanks for giving your free time and to talk to us on the podcast. And yeah, we'll end it here, and I will be in touch very soon.
Thank you, Ben, for inviting us.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you for your time as well.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, that was episode 56 of the Civil Fleet podcast. Thank you very, very much for listening. Thanks also to Kiana, Anna, Mahtab, and Hannah for coming on the Civil Fleet podcast and talking to us about the Free Homayoun campaign. I wish them all the best luck and hope that Homayoun will be free on April the 22nd. So before we close out the podcast, go check out thecivilfleet.com, check out the blog and the exclusive stories that we've got on there. You can also share the podcast around, tell your friends about it, give us a rating on podcast apps and those kind of things that would really help spread the word of the podcast. And if you can make a donation to keep the Civil Fleet running to help us cover the costs. But they are quite small. It would be great to have some funds to help us to keep doing this. To do that, you can go to ko-fi.com/civilfleet. That's ko-fi.com/civilfleet, and you can make a donation there, the cost of a coffee or a Ferrari or whatever you like. All right, and might have another episode out in April, I'm not sure, but I will in May. All right, so see you soon. Cheers, bye bye.